I don't know if you heard that this past week, two scientists, Mark Steckel of the Rockefeller University and David Thaler of the University of Basel in Switzerland, released a report concerning some unique discoveries in the area of human evolution. After researching what they called big data from the world's fastest growing genetic databases and reviewing large volumes of literature in evolutionary theory, including Darwin's, the report concludes all modern humans descended from a solitary pair who lived 100 to 200,000 years ago. They surveyed the genetic barcodes of 5 million animals and humans from 100,000 different species and deduced that all humans sprang from a single pair of adults. These barcodes, or snippets of DNA that reside outside the nuclei of living cells, suggest that it's not just people who came from a single pair of beings, but 9 out of every 10 animal species also came from a single pair of animals. I would argue it's 10 out of 10, but I'll take 9 from evolutionists. Steckel and Thaler concluded that 90% of all animal species alive today come from parents that all began giving birth at roughly the same time, less than 250,000 years ago, throwing into doubt the patterns of human evolution. Now, in case you didn't quite follow that, what they are saying is this: 2 humans and 2 dogs and 2 cats and 2 lions and 2 elephants and 2 kangaroos and 2 giraffes, etc., 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 all started reproducing their own kind about the same time, which in their estimation is 100 to 200,000 years ago. I think I heard that somewhere before, only without the hundreds of thousands of years. I believe Genesis tells us, and God said, let the land produce living creatures, what? According to their kinds. The livestock, the creatures that move along the ground, and the wild animals, each according to their kinds. And it was so. God made the wild animals according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good, and then he said, let us make man in our image. David Thaler from the University of Basel admitted, quote, this conclusion is very surprising, and I fought against it as hard as I could. Because when you're coming from a biased evolutionary perspective and you don't get the data and the answers you want, you're going to have trouble with it and fight against it. When I read the article, my first thought was this: I knew that. You probably had the same. I could have told you that. Modern science is simply catching up with the Bible. While these experts aren't quite ready to embrace biblical creationism, they are making it something every scientist now needs to take into consideration. But let me tell you how this whole problem started. How scientists, inspired by Darwin and others, started getting it wrong. While they call evolution science, it is not science. It is a theory. Almost every dictionary definition of evolution includes the word theory. And the Merriam-Webster dictionary defines theory with words like this: belief, assumption, conjecture, and speculation. Therefore, evolution is not a science. It is nothing more than conjecture and speculation. Science is based on empirical laws. So the definition of empirical science is this: knowledge ascertained by observation, experimentation, or deduction in which the results are constant and unchanging. Whenever a specific experiment takes place, the results must be the same every time for it to be empirical science. Whenever science is observed, the same thing must occur every time. It will never change before it is an empirical science. Now let me give you an example. What will happen if I let go of this ball? Some of you aren't sure. What will happen if I let go of this ball? I got a bouncy one, so I'd have to bend over and pick it up. Every time, right? I will never release this and watch it suspend or go up. It will drop every time. The empirical law of gravity says every time it's going to fall. That's why it becomes an empirical law, because it is knowledge ascertained by observation, experimentation, and deduction that repeats itself every time. Gravity is an empirical law of science. That's why most people, and probably you included, do not do trapeze acts or walk the tightrope. Because you know, if your hand lets go of the trapeze or your foot comes off the tightrope, what's going to happen? You're going to fall. And you're probably going to fall hard. And the chances of breaking something are very good, so we avoid the tightrope and the trapeze act. But let me ask you this: how hard will you fall? I mean, we know it's not the fall, it's the sudden stop. That's the hard part. But how hard will the sudden stop be? That actually depends upon the height from which you fell. If that person fell from something very high, they could reach a speed of 122 miles an hour. That's because the terminal rate of descent, according to the law of gravity, is 122 miles an hour. They will never reach a speed greater than that, but if the fall is far enough, they will reach the speed of 122 miles an hour. That's why you can drop a penny and a car off the top of the Empire State Building, and providing there's no wind or something to alter the fall, they will both hit the ground at the same time. Terminal velocity, 122 miles an hour, but never greater, and both will fall at the same rate. These are empirical laws of science. They can be observed and repeated, and the same result will occur every single time. You can look anywhere you want in the world today, and you will never observe evolution taking place. There are no half dogs, half cats, half zebras, half horses. There should be millions of them. There are none. And if you can't observe evolution taking place, then it certainly is not repeating itself. Therefore, it is not a science. It is a theory, which by definition is a belief. Evolution is a belief system, which ultimately means it is a religion. That's what religion is, a belief system or a system of beliefs. Evolution is a belief system, therefore it is a religion that is being taught in our schools in the name of science. And it is not science. Ultimately, it takes far more faith to believe in evolution than it does in creation. And here is where we as Christians too often get misled in the debate. And I hate to use the word debate because there really is no debate. We often take Scripture, which rightfully so, and use it in support of creationism and to refute the evolutionist. We talk about the flood and how the flood gives the answer to the fossil record. And it's not millions of years, but these compressed fossils would have been done in a short period of time. Could appear like millions of years, but it is not. And so we use scriptures and other things like that for our cause and in the debate, while we ignore the biggest problem that the evolutionist has. The biggest question they have to answer is, how did everything come from nothing? Until they can explain to me how something, anything, can come from nothing, they have no argument. There is no credibility to their theory, and therefore no debate. Their answer is always the same. They dodge it by saying, well, over millions of years. Over millions of years. But millions of years are irrelevant if you can't explain to me how a simple cell can come from nothing. And really, when you study a simple cell, it isn't so simple. But until you can explain to me where this came from, how it began from nothing before it, and you can clearly explain that to me, till then, there is no debate. I'm going back to that question every time until you can tell me there's nothing to argue about. Everything we see can be traced back to a point of creation. These scientists just proved it. And ultimately, everything will wind back to God. You don't need to have all the answers when dealing with the evolutionist. You just need to ask them one question. How did everything come from nothing? How did this amazingly complex, vast universe and the intricacies of the universe and even the human body, how did it come from nothing? Until you can answer that question for me, I'm not wasting my breath on you. Everything shows the design of a creator. And I'll stand on that one every time. If we could all become immortal and sit here for 1,000,000 years, nothing, as far as evolution is concerned, would change. You could sit here for 1,000,000 years with your hand out, and nothing's going to form in it. And nothing's going to change. An earthworm would still be an earthworm. A dog will still be a dog. A cat will still be a cat. A monkey will still be a monkey. And a human will still be a human. But we're created in the image of God. Just as we don't see any evolutionary transformations now, we wouldn't see them over 1,000,000 years. Because it's a lie. It does not happen. You see, we don't depend on science to validate the Bible. The Bible can stand on its own. We always start with the Bible and make science fit into it. And amazingly, these scientists, although not quite willing to admit it, have validated the Bible as truth, as scientific truth that tells us how it all began and where man came from. In Acts chapter 17, Paul is in Athens preaching the gospel, And Acts 17 tells us some Epicurean and Stoic philosophers take issue with him. Now, the Epicureans believed pleasure and avoidance of pain were the chief end of man. They were materialists who, while not denying the existence of the gods, all right, again, mythology, the gods, believed that the gods did not intervene in human affairs. They also did not believe in an afterlife. This is it. This is as good as it gets. So avoidance of pain and pleasure are the ultimate goals. The Stoics, on the other hand, believed that self-mastery was the greatest of all virtues. They believed self-mastery came from being indifferent to both pleasure and pain, reaching a place where one feels nothing. In contrast to the Epicureans, they were pantheists that believed there were just multiple gods among them. Together, the Epicureans and the Stoics sum up the extremes of the futility of man's existence without God. Without a creator, there is no meaning to life. It doesn't matter if you are an Epicurean, a Stoic, or an evolutionist. Without God, it is all meaningless. Not to mention, it's a struggle to make it work. So what does Paul do in Acts chapter 17? He answers all their potential arguments by going back to creation. Before they can even lay them out, he goes back to creation. In doing so, he is revealing to them the God of creation, who alone can give meaning to life. If God created life, and he's the author of it, then he alone defines the meaning. Now let's look at what Paul said in Acts 17. Here's what it says. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by human hands, as if he needed anything, because he himself gives all men life and breath and everything else. Paul is in Athens, this great historic cultural city, and he looks around and he sees all these splendid temples, idol temples to false pagan gods. And so he looks at them, and then he takes these philosophers and he says that the God of creation is not only greater than these temples, but he is greater than the universe, both the visible and the invisible. And therefore he cannot be contained in a building built by human hands like these other gods as you propose. As the creator, he is in need of nothing, and he needs no one. But rather it is we humans who are dependent on him for our life, our very breath, and everything else, including the meaning to life now and in the hereafter. And then he says this, from one man, meaning Adam, God made every nation of men that they should inhabit the whole earth. There it is. 2,000 years before these genetic scientists came to the conclusion that all humans came from one couple, the Apostle Paul already said it. And from that one couple, Adam and Eve, men have spread over the whole earth as they knew it in Paul's day and as we know it now. Genesis chapter 10 tells us this, that after the flood, Noah's sons and their descendants down several generations spread out over the whole earth by their clans according to their languages. That's what it says. It also tells us in Genesis 10 that in the time of Peleg, who was 6 generations from Noah, it says this, the earth was divided. No doubt the great force from the flood cracked the plates under the earth. They began to shift, and as these people spread out over the earth by their languages, forming tribes and nations, and the continental drift took place, that when the explorers went from continent to continent, they found humans all over, because the Bible already told us how all that occurred thousands of years ago. Paul is merely reaffirming all of Genesis when he says, from one man, Adam, God made every nation of men that they should inhabit the whole earth. One man, one woman, Adam and Eve. And from there, mankind spread out over the face of the whole earth. And then he says this, and God determined the times set for them and the exact places where they should live. He did this so that men would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from each of us. Understanding that God the Creator has also established the times and places for nations, tribes, and people, then men should be moved to seek him. If he is the creator of life and the controller of the universe, and he has predetermined times and places for kingdoms and kings and nations and people, it should drive men, point men to him. Men should be seeking him. Reasoning and logic should naturally take them back to the first cause, God. Natural revelation in the human conscience and the order of the physical world leaves them without excuse. And that's what Paul says in Romans 1. All men are without excuse. And yet, they still refuse to believe in a creator. And without a creator, all you are left with is the meaningless religion of evolution. There are a lot of meaningless isms, isms, whatever out there, but they all stem back to evolution. That is the original lie. That is the original religion, false religion, that sets the precedent for everything else that men believe in or do not believe in. Now, in regard to the exact times and places set for them, the Bible, hope you follow with me, the Bible in regard to Christmas says this in Galatians 4. In the fullness of time, God's exact predetermined time. In the fullness of time, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons. In the fullness of time, at the exact, perfect, calculated time, when the world was lost under meaningless Greek philosophies, when the world was lost under severe Roman oppression, when the world was lost under a law that couldn't save them, in God's perfect time, he sent forth his Son as the only one who could give meaning and purpose to life, as the only one to set the physical and spiritual captives free, and the only one that could provide eternal redemption and adoption as sons for men on earth. In the exact fullness of time, when God wanted it to happen. God determined the time and the date so no one could miss. There is a sovereign creator who is in control. Now, real quickly, let me go back to the scientific report. And it says, all modern humans descended from one couple. We know that to be Adam and Eve. The Christmas story in the Gospels is introduced to us by the way of the genealogy of Jesus. And here is what Luke's Gospel says. All right? Tells us that Jesus was the son of Joseph, the son of Heli, the son of Mathat, the son of Levi, the son of Melchi. I'm not going to read them all for you. Yeah, amen. Next slide. Okay, they go on and they go on and they go on. And next slide. All right, there is the genealogy in Luke's Gospel. Okay? Now, let me abbreviate this for you. Here it is. Jesus was the son of Joseph, the son of Adam, the son of God. There it is. The Christmas story tells us Jesus came from Adam, and Adam was created by God. And every other living person on earth today, including you and I, can also be traced back to two individuals, Adam and Eve. The report doesn't tell us anything new. It tells us what we already knew. That in the beginning, God created. And He created every animal in its likeness according to its kind. And He created humans in His image. And the genealogy of Jesus Christ, although not carrying to the future, obviously, but the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the Christmas story, clearly tells us that up to the point of Christ and going back for all those years, it clearly traces the history of humankind back to two people, Adam and Eve. And that is creation in Christmas. Would you bow your heads, please?